Baldur's Gate 3. A big in. So this has come to early access. It's out at time of recording, I don't know, half an hour, is it? For those living under a rock or that don't know, Baldur's Gate 3, Matthew, before we get into the nitty gritty, what is Baldur's Gate 3?
So Baldur's Gate 3 is the return of the legendary RPG, revived by Larian Studios. That we say revived, probably taken over is a better term for it, because it is it's not really the Baldur's Gate you know and love. It looks a lot more like a Larian game, that is Divinity Original Sin. It's made in their engine. It's got a lot of their thinking in it. But what surprised me, and this is the headline take, it feels to me like a marriage of what Larian do brilliantly in Original Sin 2 and what Bioware went on to do after Baldur's Gate in Dragon Age and Mass Effect. This may sound like a very superficial take, in that I'm literally just looking at the cinematics and going, they look like Mass Effect or Dragon Age cinematics. You see the characters, but there is something about that more on the ground sort of cinematic storytelling that just changes the whole vibe of it. You know, something I talked about in the preview, which is on the site, or the early access review. But it felt to me like, I loved Original Sin 2. Do not get me wrong. It's quite traditional, and I felt like it kind of holds you at an arm's length when it comes to storytelling. You know, it's a game with a narrator that fills in a lot of the gaps. You view everything from this isometric angle. Like, there are animations and things happening, but you're not there in the meat of it. Like, it has to sell a lot of the emotions with writing. And just seeing Larian's writing brought to life in this more modern feeling style, it's really exciting. Like, I love Larian's characters, but here I feel like I know them a lot better. Like, they're instantly established. Like, they have to be kind of fuller characters because they have a physical presence. You know, there's like the digital actors. So it's that and the voice acting together, like, really bring them to life. Yeah, so that was like, that was the big thing. I was surprised that, and I don't know why I was surprised, because it should be obvious that it was going to be like that, but it really does feel like, you know, a kind of Dragon Age in the kind of storytelling, but then with the kind of depth and scale of Larian's systems.
Okay. How much, or how big is this? Because, you know, it is worth noting for anyone that hasn't been keeping up with the development of Baldur's Gate 3 that this has been released in early access.
This is the first act of the game. I'm going to come absolutely clean. I haven't completed it yet because I played it for about 15 hours and then there was a big update and it wiped my save file, so I had to start another character. Welcome to the world of early access, baby. Yeah, but actually it was great because basically I went in knowing kind of what I had to do, and I basically went, well, I'm going to make all different decisions and see what happens. And actually, it was really substantially different. Like, I am pretty confident in saying that if you were to put this next to the first act of Original Sin 2, which was the sort of the escape from Fort Joy, this is vastly like more sprawling and branching. I mean, physically, the map is way bigger, but also the kind of depth of choices, the variety of things that can happen, really grand, and they're things that feel like they're going to have big repercussions down the game. I mean, you know, a lot of people you meet in this are heading to Baldur's Gate, which is clearly, like, I don't know if it's the next destination or the end of the game, but, you know, and you are deciding the fates of a lot of these people in this area. So whether or not you actually meet them there or get them there, like, I imagine the city could be a very different place based on decisions you make. How much do you know about, like, the story of the game?
Very, very little. So that was going to be my next question. If I am a Baldur's Gate noob, Like, is there anything here for
Oh
me?
yeah, so I mean, really, the connective tissue is currently kind of non-existent.
Oh,
I have the feeling that, like, much further down the line, the big twist is going to be that it is more closely tied. But right here, the situation you're in, the characters you've got, they are not the old characters. It's set 100 years after the events. It's actually, if it has any narrative ties, it's to the campaign, the recent campaign book Descent into Avernus, which basically it was a story that took people down into sort of one of the layers of hell, and this is set sort of canonically after that. So there are references to things which if you have played that, I would assume they would mean a bit more. Like there's lots of devils and devilly stuff going on. But the big hook, and they've talked about it quite a lot, so it's not really a spoiler, is that all the characters, all the companions, and that includes you if you make your own character, are trapped by the mind flayers at the start. And you have these sort of tadpoles inserted into your eye that then worm into your brain. And the deal with these is they get into your brain, and traditionally they turn you into a mind flayer. It's how they hatch more of themselves. So you basically transform. So everyone has this kind of ticking time bomb in their head. Everyone wants to get rid of this stuff so they can move on and get out of there. The footage you're seeing at the moment is on board the ship at the start where you get caught, which is kind of a tutorial area where you escape from, and then you find yourself down on the ground. You're meeting companions. Basically, everyone wants to get out of their head. Everyone disagrees on how it should be done. I mean, in the same way that your objective was to escape Fort Joy in the first act of Original Sin 2, your objective here is to deal with the tadpole. And
this
I know
evil
it sounds
tadpole.
dumb, but
Yes.
then it's very well done because it has this like instant. It's like instant motivation, and it's not like if you don't do this, the world's going to end. It's like if you don't do this, you're going to end. It's a very like the stakes are very.
Well, yeah, see, I like that.
And-
Yeah, because then that'll like in other RPGs where, as you mentioned, Mass Effect. You know, the world is going to end, the universe is going to end in Mass Effect. But yeah, why not? I have time to go to the shop and buy whatever, grab that thing for that person and all that. Whereas you're saying the story here is more personal. It's more about the actual people involved and the tadpole that they're trying to get out of their heads.
Yeah, and so you have this, and you have all these disagreements over like what you want to do, and this is where I'd say the thing it has most in common with more Baldur's Gate 2 than Baldur's Gate 1 is that game also had like the party was in quite a grim place at the start of the game, and everyone was quite unhappy, and it causes kind of sort of divisions and drama, and like this feels like a spiritual successor to that kind of thinking. It's very easy for people to say, oh, this has nothing in common with the old Baldur's Gate. And if you play it like it has, there are vibes, there are elements and ideas that you can sense, and, but it is, there's no explicit connection. But the other thing I really like about it is that like all the characters obviously have their own storylines. Like in the full game, you'll be able to play as the companions if you want. You can pick to start as one of them, and they are called Origins characters, and it's a similar system to Original Sin 2. But the thing I really liked about that is that they all have their own motive. They're all trying to achieve their own things on top of the tadpole. Some of them are more bothered about their personal issues than they are the tadpole, which sort of hints that they've got like some bad business going on. And those objectives put them massively in competition with each other. And it also puts them in competition with like missions you'll find. Like you often go into a mission and you've got all these things that you're trying to do. Then all of a sudden there is one of the characters is like, well, personally, we can kind of hijack this for my purposes. And so let's do that instead of helping these people. And that throws a spanner in the works. And I was really impressed with how many kind of conflicts of interests it manages to cook up in quite a small amount of time. Like everything feels compromised like really quickly, which is really exciting.
Well, Definitely. Like even you said when you had to restart your game and play through it, and you decided to choose different options. Like the fact that it does sound so different. Like we've spoken about it before when we played through the Outer Worlds or just other RPGs, where games give you the illusion of choice, but even sometimes games are actually poor at that. And it doesn't really matter what you choose. But from what you've seen so far, your story could be quite different, or at least that's what
Yeah,
I'm.
I mean,
That's what I take.
absolutely. I mean, one of the things they suggested before they launched early access, they said, well, as this isn't a character you're going to be carrying on, why don't you play differently to how you would intend to play in the final game? So, like, if you normally play really good, do the bad decisions. Just see like how flexible it is, and it's pretty impressive, like how much stuff you can skip by making certain decisions, and how you can kind of get in with other people, and how certain locations are sort of flipped on their head depending on who you side with. Like my second character, after my first one was white, I decided just to go like full evil and try and get in with the kind of the big sort of goblin castle, which is where the kind of the it's kind of the major antagonist of the first act is kind of hiding away.
Right.
And yeah, it was like a completely different perspective on the thing. I managed to change the outcome of another mission to kind of get in with them early. Once I was in there, I was seeing bits of the castle. The fact that I could just walk around it, like without having to worry about any conflict, it was like a completely different take on it. I mentioned it in my sort of review thing that I like weirdly it has the feel of like some areas in this have the feel of like a Hitman level. Like they're that dense with
What? Oh,
like
okay.
this goblin castle when you're walking around it anyway, because you think, well, if I was on worse terms here, this would be a nightmare. Like I'd have to be up in the rafters, like jumping around, sneaking. It's got quite a robust stealth system compared to Original Sin. Well, compared to most RPGs, actually, the stealth is pretty tight, I think. There were like side missions that you wouldn't discover if you weren't there on those terms, and it had a very different flavor to it, and it felt like very alive. There was story everywhere. I was really, really impressed. I mean, it's what they did in Original Sin 2, but just so much bigger. And I just think it's very reductive to say, well, it isn't like the original Baldur's Gate, 20 years ago, and people have made games that ape those, Pillars of Eternity, the Pathfinder Kingmaker, I think people are still making those games. I think that audience is catered for by studios who want to make those games. I think, and fundamentally here, they're making a game they want to make. The debate is open, like whether, is it that meaningful to call something Baldur's Gate 3? Like the people Baldur's Gate 3 would mean stuff to probably, do want those older feeling games. You wonder, like, did they just want to make a D&D game? But like, who really knows the situation of that? I mean, when I asked him that when they very first announced it, I said, you guys are flying high. Why not, why kind of bow to someone else's thing? Why kind of work with someone else's sort of story and world? And he's like, well, we love D&D. It's the D&D that motivates them rather than Baldur's Gate, I would say. But also, like, as gamers, like, as a motivating thing, when they said Baldur's Gate, the studio was like, yeah, everyone's really into it. But they're sort of filtering it through their own thing. And I would say it is got a very different rhythm and tone to Original Sin. Like, it's not that it's a lot more serious, but it's definitely less sort of silly fantasy. Like, I'd say it's a bit more straight-faced. I'd say it's way more not streamlined, but it gets to the point super quickly, unlike me. I think.
Well, can I pick you up on a point that you've been mentioning there about those Baldur's Gate fans? Like, so I asked if there's something here for me as somebody who would be coming to the series new. Is there much here for somebody who loved the first two Baldur's Gate games? Like, can they come into this and fall in love here, or if they have an open mind, like if they're looking for the exact same game, they're obviously not.
No, I mean, there's like a nostalgia in like some of the spells. Maybe there's like a lot of iconography where you're like, oh yeah, that. And I do think it. Like I said, I am sure, it will have deeper narrative tie. It would feel like it would be throwing away like such a wealth of lore not to. But I think it's just trying to establish itself in this first act as its own thing. I'd say it's a D&D game first, rather than specifically a Baldur's Gate game. I think it acknowledges that 20 years has passed. It's very hard to tell. I like. It's a bit of a gamut. Like I would say, if you are like, if Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 are your all-time favorite games and you don't know, I wouldn't necessarily gamble on, 60 quid or 50 quid or whatever it is on early access. Like, people are going to be streaming the shit out of this, and, you'll get a really good feel for it that way. I would say that, like I know there are a lot of arguments against Original Sin 2. There's lots of stuff people don't like about that game, that series, and, they'll cite that when they say why this shouldn't be like that. And I do think they have tackled some of that. Like the combat has fewer of the irritations. There's less focus on elemental surfaces. It hasn't got the kind of physical magical armor system. Basically, a lot of Original Sin 2, for all its sort of systemic kind of openness, kind of forced you down quite limited paths, unless you really know what you were doing, because you were just trying to fight against certain systems. This doesn't feel like it has that, again, like based on what I've played, which is about just under 25 hours. It's very hard to get that kind of read on it, but combat wise, I think it feels faster. I think the rules feel a bit more rigid. I think the fact that you've got D&D classes means the characters are a bit more focused. It's not like Divinity, where basically any character can be anything. It has more limitations, and maybe people will find those more satisfying to work in. It also looks gorgeous, and the companions are really good. Like, I won't spoil them because you've got to play it and see, but there's fun twists, and like there's one, like when he died in battle, just a common death triggered a side mission because all of a sudden, like, there's something very, very wrong with his body and you have to fix it. And it kind of throws these like surprises at you. Honestly, I've had so much fun with this weekend. I've really, really enjoyed it. I am an Original Sin 2 fan for sure. I'm fond of Baldur's Gate, but I'm not like I'm not completely sort of zealot about it. I think this is really fantastic. If you, whether you're getting on early access, like, the pain of playing this is you will want to see more, and it has a natural limit, and you're going to have to wait whatever, maybe a year. Yeah,
however long. Yeah, like how long? But then I suppose you have so much content in all the different choices. If there is such a if your choices have such a dramatic impact on the characters, the world, all that, then I suppose you could play this first chapter or whatever they're calling it, however many different times. Have you gotten a sense of how long that would take to play from start to finish?
So they've said 20 hours, which I think is like, that's beasting certain things, like the map's big. There's a lot going on based on what you choose to do. Honestly, there's a lot here. I mean, it's that there is a list of the stats compared to the early access for Original Sin 2, and it's just, I mean, it's something mad. Like, that had 200 characters. This has 600 characters in it. This first act, and there's loads here, and there's loads that you are definitely missing. Like, it's one of those games that whenever you kill a character with a name, you always think, well, that guy had a name for a reason. Like, he was probably part of something I haven't even discovered. So I'm like, I just want to go back and play more of it. I'm really into it. I think it's fabulous.